Welcome to Operation Successful Transition. In this podcast, my guests and I will be talking about the 4 pillars of housing, work, benefits, and mental health to open doors for veterans and connect you with the people you need to meet. We deeply appreciate your service and sacrifice and hope to help make your transition back to civilian life smoother. Your success is important. You are important. Welcome to the Operation Successful Transition podcast. I'm your host, Sherri Eccles, and we're going to be covering over time housing, work, school, and mental health aspects of transitioning back to civilian life. Today, I have Joel Sparta with me. Joel is a 21 year,
I wish.
right? 21-year retired combat veteran with tours in the Balkans, Africa, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Since exiting from the military, he's worked in various positions in the real estate and finance with a strong focus on veteran education and advocacy. Joel works tirelessly to seek out collaborative initiatives to share experience with veterans and veteran advocates. Also a current board member for the Veterans Association of Real Estate Professionals, the Military City Chapter, which is a national nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy and fair housing initiatives. So Joel, let's tell them what we're going to be focusing on today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on.
So excited too.
Yeah, no, this is a great idea. I was super excited to be asked by you to do this. Any opportunity that I can get to try to educate or provide some perspective is a great thing. And so I like the idea that you have this holistic approach, right? These pillars for veterans and their transition, and just making sure that they understand what they're entitled to. And so today we figured, well, let's just start with one of the biggest topics, right? There's a whole bunch of people that already talk about it, and that's fine, which is the VA loan, VA housing benefit, right? So why kick off, right, with that? Why kick off with that? Of all the things that we could talk about, why kick off with the VA home loan benefit?
Everybody loves to talk about real estate, right?
Well, yeah, right. Like it's sexy, right? I think everybody wants to be a homeowner, right? It's kind of a part of the American dream, right? Like that's what we're all aspiring to, a house with a white picket fence, 2 kids, a dog, whatever that looks like.
Well, it's a great way to build wealth while you're living. You're not paying someone else's mortgage, you're paying your own and building your own equity. And in the last couple of years, we've seen the great equity boosts a lot of people have had. So building wealth left and right.
No, 100%, right? And so like today, we're just going to talk a little bit about like the statistics for that, right? First and foremost, I think when it comes to like educating veterans on their benefits and the veterans themselves understanding the power of the benefits, right? Well, it's kind of like, all right, well, what's in it for me, right? With them. And, but I think for people to have a perspective on that, we're going to talk a little bit about real briefly, just some of the statistics and I guess misnomers surrounding, excuse me, surrounding that benefit.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to talk, a little bit about also if veterans aren't getting this information like soon enough and what the power of this benefit can do for them. Like they're in many cases missing out on a lot of that equity that you're talking about, right? And maybe I'll probably share a couple examples real quick on like some examples firsthand for myself and people that I've worked with, and the power of that benefit and what it's done. And lastly, we'll just wrap it up with like, okay, like, well, what can we do about it, right? I mean, beyond educating and trying to share the information, like, what can we do about it? Whether you're an advocate or you're a currently serving military member, or you're a veteran, who's already transitioned, or you're in the middle of the transition, it's like, okay, well, what's up? And so, and we'll close up afterwards and maybe share some links and contact information if anybody wants to get into the weeds.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah. So let's jump off with like some of the, I guess, the hard facts, right? So of all the benefits that are out there for veterans, and there's a lot of them. Like I will tip my hat, to the, our legislative body and representative, and the public in general, who have very much gotten behind the military in recent decades to
Yeah.
ensure that, hey, like we're being taken care of post service, right? So yeah, like it is a volunteer thing. Of course, we raise our hand, support, and defend, and so everybody knows what comes with that territory. But also at the same time, right? Like we're not a country that has like conscription or something like that. Like God forbid, we all see some of the things that are going on in the world today, and so um, for the folks that just live day to day, in their normal lives, it's also important for them to understand that, hey, like there's a group of individuals that are willing to lay everything on the line to ensure that you have those liberties and those freedoms. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, all right, when we do hang up that uniform and you know salute smartly and move on, uh, we need to know like how to do that, right? Because I
Right.
think one thing that a lot of people don't realize, right? Like because there is so much information out there, there's loads of information. It's almost like paralysis by analysis.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
there's good information, there's factual information, there's not factual information, right? There's organizations that want to help, right? They have American flag on their business card, but they really don't do a good job, or they have different agendas maybe that don't align with what's trying to be achieved,
Yeah.
and it can get very, very frustrating for somebody that is transitioning or has transitioned from the military, to try to find the right source, right, and
Yeah.
get the support they need. And so like the housing benefit specifically, the reason a lot of people talk about it so much is like it's directly connected to the whole reason that you wouldn't even say, hey, I want to support and defend. Like, hey, you're buying essentially a piece of the land you fought to defend. Like,
Right.
it only makes sense to go and say, hey, I fought for this nation, right? Like, let me plant a flag in my front yard. And I think that it's um, a fair assumption, essentially, to think that anybody that had wore the cloth of the nation deserves to own a piece of it. Like, that's
Yeah.
just a completely my opinion, but I would assume that a lot of people would agree with me.
I,
So, yeah, go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
I agree totally.
Yeah. And so, like, from a number standpoint, like, currently serving and post service, we have about 22 million veterans in the United States today. So, it's a pretty good chunk of people. We're here in Military City, AKA San Antonio. And so, we have multiple installations here, hundreds of thousands of veterans. We are the seventh largest city in the United States currently, which a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
But we still have a big disparity when it comes to housing and veterans owning a piece of the land they fought to defend. So much so that of those 22 million, approximately only 16% of those folks have ever utilized this housing benefit,
Wow.
which is just crazy to me. Only
Yeah.
16% of that demographic, right?
So why
And
do
so
you
then
think
you
that
start
is? Why do you think the number is so low?
education, awareness,
They just
right?
don't know it's available.
A combination of that. Buying a house is a scary prospect. Um, you know, uh, for the military, a lot of times we're only focused on the mission. Like you're not really thinking that far ahead on, hey, what's next? You're kind of waiting for the next PCS or the next deployment. And so like the thought of like buying a house, I think is connected to like officially putting roots down.
Roots down.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm done. Like I can plant that flag now, which I get it. But to your point, like you opened up the conversation with, hey, I mean, look at rent prices right now.
Yeah.
Look at cost of living increases. And yeah, there's some economic stuff going on that drives some of that. But by and large, I think people are afraid to make the decision without understanding how to protect themselves, have a plan B, have a plan C, if
Right.
something changed, to where they're not going to put their family at risk, or themselves at risk, financially speaking, or create further hardships. But the reality is, to your point, like, you are paying a mortgage, whether you own a home or not.
Right.
It's it's either your landlord's mortgage or your own. And
Right. And
so,
if you're paying the landlord's mortgage, it's going to be more than what the
mhm,
mortgage is, because they have to bid, they have to build in enough for repairs and probably a little cash flow too. So
yeah,
cheaper to buy, really.
it is. I had a couple rental properties here in San Antonio, that silly me, I should have hung on to them, but I liquidated, to put some money into a business and whatnot. But I had a tenant, on one particular house. I was cash flowing after property management and, everything. I was cash flowing about $600 a month on, and I was still very competitive from a rent price because I wanted to keep people in the house.
Yeah.
So the only way that I even kind of got into that world and started to even entertain some of those things, because being a landlord sounds like, you just hear all the horror stories. Like, well, why would I ever rent my house? Like, somebody's going to turn it into a meth lab. It's going to get destroyed. I'm going to lose everything, right? And yeah, those things happen for sure. Um,
But those are smaller percentage than, and you screen your tenants when they come in. Typically people with better credit ratings or treat your property a little bit better, check their income, their education levels. It's not 100%, but in general, you can screen your tenants so that they treat your property better.
yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
so, like, when I'm out educating and having conversations with people about it, I it's just, it's educating them to the point to where they have a perspective to understand, like, how to do it properly, and like I said, protect themselves.
Yeah.
Because once you lay it all out, then everybody's like, oh, that makes sense. And so it's funny how many people want to be entrepreneurs and, establish a legacy for themselves, but then leave so much on the table, um, that is right there for them to start that journey much sooner, um, than, say, a lot of people do after 20 years of service, right? Like, one of the companies I used to work for, early on in my career in real estate and finance, one of the owners is a massive educator too. And, you start hearing things and it just clicks a little differently in the brain. But, like, let's just say you're like me and you do 21 years and you've never bought a house ever.
Right.
And you get out, okay, I'm best case scenario 38, right? Because I did my 20 years. Best case scenario 38. Now I'm going to start a 30-year mortgage right now. So by the time I get that house paid off, I'm going to be 68. Well, that'd be cool. Hopefully, I'm still around, and I get to enjoy that. Or I can start making preparations and start educating myself and doing the research and talking with folks that do it and know how to do it, and start laying the foundation sooner. And that's really what the point of this conversation today is. We could talk about the VA home loan benefit, credit ratings, qualification, blah, 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 but that's not the point. The point is
Right.
to leverage the benefit, A, just in its most basic form, buy a house. Um, but then also, B, how can you leverage that benefit further to continue to build a legacy, to continue to build, financial wealth,
Right.
and other things of that nature.
I
So,
think the last meeting, the class that I was in that you taught last, you talked about an example of a guy who bought a house and then added another one, just began to accumulate properties
mhm.
by keeping the one he had and then moving on and adding
Yes,
subsequent ones and just renting them out. So
yeah, exactly. So, like, in the most basic form, how I explain to people is like, the VA home loan benefit is essentially a blank checkbook um, that you have at your disposal to buy initially a primary residence, a home. Um, and again, if you know how to do it properly, you can continue to use that checkbook um, to buy more than just one home. Because it's basic stuff, just like some people think like you can only use it once, or you can't use it till you get out. You can't have more than one home at the same time. And that's just not the case. Like the story that you were talking about specifically was a Marine who's a good friend of mine, still to this day, um, who I consulted with early on in my career, and we worked together over a period of 3-4 years to leverage that checkbook to continue to buy houses. And so he ended up having 4 houses that he all collected within a span of 4 years.
Wow.
So like it seems like how do you do that? Like, oh my gosh, like I can't afford that. Like, how much money is that? And I won't get into the weeds on that specific topic, without like a whiteboard, because people will be like, "What are you talking about, dude? Like, I'm losing my mind."
It's hard to talk
But
about numbers without seeing them sometimes, but
yeah,
there are just lots of scenarios and lots of different ways to use it. And if you're thinking of investing in real estate or starting to build your wealth with real estate, it would really pay to talk to someone like Joel or a loan officer who's really versed in VA loans and how to use that benefit to your best advantage. Yeah. Just like getting a good accountant who helps you on your taxes rather than just, putting it down according to the books,
that is a very, very great example, right? And there's a lot of people that's a great example. Um, there's lots of options for different people that do different types of specialties for anything. The tax thing especially is good. You can use TurboTax. You can go to the H&R Block inside of Walmart in a little curtain, right? You can go to maybe a physical storefront, or you could work with a CPA or tax strategist or something like that. All different levels, right? And you're going to get different results from each one of those entities. So you're spot on. Talking to somebody that's well versed and educated in the topic specifically is very critical, because you can definitely find a loan officer, for example, to do a VA loan. There's thousands and thousands of them. And of course, everybody is going to say they're an expert.
Yeah.
Just like I'm sure in your neck of the woods, right, as a real estate professional, everybody is of course I've done VA transactions before, right? Like I'm not going to miss out on an opportunity to provide for myself. So unfortunately, people bite off more than they can chew sometimes, or they're limited in what they're even capable of doing in the first place due to the organization that they're affiliated with. So there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Loads. And
so what would be a tip for vetting out a lender if, say, a veteran somewhere in any city goes to see a lender? How could they vet them to see if they really know what they're talking about or not? What would be some tips that you might give them?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, we're both going to get a whole bunch of offers for VA home loan benefits on our social media feed after we finish this.
Right.
Like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, of course, number one, we're creatures of habit. We tend to take the path of least resistance. Like I said earlier, there's going to be lots of things that look very patriotic and veteran friendly and claim to be, all of that. And just don't judge. Don't not judge a book by its cover, but be careful. Be careful what you chase, right? And so, like, before anybody jumps into anything, the first thing I would say is do your research, right? Like, we have this wonderful thing called the internet. You've got wonderful tools like Google, Yelp, right? You know, all these things where you can do a little bit of research. If you're about to make a very large transaction, like purchasing a home, it would certainly behoove you to make sure that you know what you're getting into. And
Right. You want
so after you,
competent representation.
competent representation, right? There's some folks that only focus on VA home loans, right? Like that's all they do. They don't do anything else. Um, versus somebody that does all products, right? Like I can go to a pediatrician, but if I got a heart problem, I'm not going to the dentist.
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
So you seek out these, and I would say the next thing beyond just doing your research is knowing at least a handful of questions to ask, right? Like, hey, maybe can you give me an example of how your involvement with the veteran community, right? Like that's a pretty good question to ask. It's kind of vanilla, but nobody's going to take care of veterans like veterans. No offense to anybody that's not a veteran, but beyond that are the advocates and the people that are in the trenches with veterans, going where veterans are at, participating like yourself in education opportunities and or carving out a niche to educate themselves as much as possible
Mm-hmm.
on what's happening in that space. And so I would say asking some basic questions like, hey, can you explain to me, you know, what do you what how explain to me um, your impact to the veteran community, right? How many VA loans have you done, right? Just basic questions like if you're trying to qualify any other professional, right? Cost aside, interest rates aside, um, everybody's got the best widget, but when it comes down to like who's really going to know this the best, it's the subject matter experts, and the subject matter experts reside where the information is. And so that's what I would say more than anything. Obviously veterans tend to by and large trust veterans the most. So like I'm always gonna like hit up my veteran buddy and be like, hey, do you know a real estate agent that's works with veterans? Or do you know a mortgage company that does VA loans? And they might have had a really great experience. And they might refer you off to a company that, like we said earlier, offers those products, but are they subject matter experts in that? Different story.
Right.
Now,
It seems like there is a lot of word of mouth advertising among veterans, and
mhm.
they find someone who works well, and that person gets blessed with all kinds of referrals and being able to help a lot of people then. And whether it's helping out with housing or education or work or mental health too, how to get disability. That's another thing that we're going to be talking about here on the podcast, because I think that's just an exasperating and flustering thing for a lot of people to try and get that cleared once they're out. So
yeah, no, you're Sherry, you're spot on with that, right? And another thing regarding veterans just in general, right? Besides the trust factor of you know the referral and whatnot, um, you were pretty good at like for the most part like smelling out BS. And so once you kind of burn that bridge with a veteran, it's really hard to get that trust back. And so that's where you say, like, okay, if I know this person is reputable, they come highly recommended. Multiple people might say the same thing, right? Like, okay, like this is, I'm feeling like this is a safe space, and you should know, or anybody that is a veteran seeking out information pretty quickly, in my opinion, anyways. If they landed in a good spot or not. And if not, then there's people like yourself who they can reach out to say, hey, can you just check 6 on this, man? Because like,
right.
I think I'm good, but like, I don't know. I'm having a little bit of concerns on a couple of things. Just ask questions. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know without asking.
Half of my job is connecting people and, matching people up with services or a particular person that they need. So I'm always listening for what someone might need or what someone else might be able to provide. So
yeah, 100%, right? And so, I mean, we're talking about the VA home loan benefit, and like we've been kind of high level on like just the scope of it and like seeking it out and whatnot. But as far as a transition goes, right, and as far as folks that are currently serving, I'd like to just I won't get into the weeds now. I'll protect the names of the innocent, right? So I won't mention names, but I might have told you this story or maybe not, but I was on a very large military installation here in South Texas, extremely large, and not in San Antonio. And I was talking to the chief of housing, and I was trying to convey to him that we needed opportunity to come on post. So there's a little hint to educate soldiers. There's another hint on the importance of this particular benefit now before they get out, so they can understand how to start asking the right questions and seeking out those professionals and getting the information they need. And you know what he said to me?
What did he say?
He said to me, why in the world would we, this is the chief of housing, why in the world would we want to advocate for soldiers to purchase homes in places that they're not going to stay? All it's going to do is create a larger burden on the family financially and not allowing them to focus on the mission. So in the interim, base housing in many places, a lot of it is privately contracted now, but if it's being run by the military, then I can tell you that it's not the greatest. And you got these folks that are serving active right now that are getting this tax-free housing benefit called BAH, which stands for buy a house. I'm just kidding. I stole that one, but from another friend of mine. And if he ever sees this, he'll be like, "That was my line. You stole it." I'm like, "Sorry, man. You didn't copyright it." But basic allowance for housing, it's tax-free dollars that is going to housing, whether it's going into base housing, which they take it all. You don't get to keep any of it. There's nothing that you can write off on your taxes. There's no benefits to that at all. You might get a free TV when you sign up, but they're going to take your money happily, month over month. And
so why not build your wealth with that and put that into a house for yourself? Yeah.
I mean, that's the key, right? But like the attitude of a lot of military members is what we opened up with, which is, well, I don't want, it's too risky, right? Essentially, it's too risky. That's the concern when it really comes down to it. I'm scared. I don't want to make a bad decision.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's really what it comes down
to. The rule used to be you have to stay in a place for about 5 years to get your closing, your costs back when you buy a house. But prices have gone up so much in the last couple of years. And I think they're still going to go up because inventory is staying low and population is coming up. These millennials are wanting to buy. And lots of renters are wanting to buy too. So I think it's going to keep going up for a while. So if the concern is if you're moving every 3 years, maybe you might risk not gaining, you know what I mean? You might lose a little bit, but I think in a market where the prices are increasing like this, it's a little safer than if it was a buyer's market and things were on a downward trend.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, approaching that with a mindset from like a business mindset, right? And working with a team of people that help you plan and put plans together, because there's nothing to say that you have to sell that house, right? Like okay, I get it. You're PCSing, but you don't have to sell the house. Well, I don't want the burden of renting it. Well, that's why you have a property management company.
Yeah.
That's why you connect with a real estate professional, right? That's why we establish a budget that is, rental market analysis, right? That is fair
Yeah.
for the area. And if you're in an area, say like where this large installation is at, that is continuing to grow and continuing to have folks transition in, transition out, like you're going to always need a place to live. It's
Right.
just, managing it accordingly. So yeah, if you were just to buy a house and try to sell it like right after buying it, like that is really risky because
Mm-hmm.
you can't necessarily predict the future. But it's also risky to put all of your money into something and get zero return ever.
Right. Yeah,
Like that's pretty risky. Wouldn't you say? Like, do the
absolutely.
math on say 3 years of tax-free BAH at any base anywhere, and tell me how much money was left on the table that you get zero return on ever. You will
Exactly.
never see any of that.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to me.
That might be something we could do in the future is work through what those numbers kind of look like, because there's kind of an average of what property managers charge. And, if you have a
Mhm.
house that's near a base, that's going to have people at it all the time. So you have a good chance of renting to people like you who do what you do and care like you do.
For sure. And not every, like, I would tell people, like, just because you're in the military and you're living near a base or on a base doesn't mean it's a great place to buy a house. We, from time to time, go through these base realignment enclosures, otherwise known as BRAC. And, like, things can change, right? Like, there's some economically depressed areas that military installations reside in, and they don't have the greatest real estate market, right? In some cases it's depreciating, it's not appreciating.
Mm.
And so like, but that's where you're having the team. Like if I just go to like if I this is working with somebody that's working for your best interest,
Right.
not just trying to get a check, right? Like if I was a good real estate professional like yourself, I had a veteran come to me, and let's say I'm in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, and we have a base in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. Um, Depending on what the economy was like, the housing forecasts, what is the turnover? Is this kind of installation like? Is this a like? Is this a place that likely is going to stick around for a while? Or is it just some sleepy little, post or base, right? Kind of that could be on a chopping block at some time. Because I've heard some really bad stories about things like that happening.
Yeah.
And so I think again, utilizing like a business mindset, is this a good investment right now? In some
Yeah.
cases, it might make more sense to rent.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
would tell you to
Definitely.
rent before live on base because at least I can control what I'm paying. But every situation is different.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I hadn't thought of either. I'm thinking of the big cities, not thinking of the remote areas that may not be
Mhm.
so fabulous. But yeah, you're right. You do have to evaluate, what are rents doing right now in most areas. Rent is way up, but that's not always the case in location, right?
Location, location, location. As much as military members PCS, uh, and again, one of the companies I used to work for had really great marketing and some really clever ways of introducing some of these topics to people. So one of the analogies that used to get used a lot, and I think it's kind of funny, but it's kind of true, is like a Monopoly board. Like if anybody has ever played Monopoly, not is it only a great way to start giant quasi riots within a family household. Um,
Extreme
you don't.
competition.
Oh yeah, super competitive. Like I've fought people damn near over Monopoly, but I can tell you one thing: the people that don't buy any property don't win the game.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You just go around the board paying rent all day, you're gonna lose eventually, right? So the Marine we were talking about that three had purchased these four houses. He actually just sold one of them to pay off some debt and do some other stuff like that. Not debt accrued from the housing, but just other life stuff. Like those houses when he purchased them um, 3 4 years ago, the appreciation of those Sherry and the amount of equity that that dude has now in those
Crazy.
four houses is life changing. If
Yeah.
he wanted to liquidate everything, he could. He could even sell a couple, pay off another, and just use it as full time cash flow. Forever, as long as he's managing that, properly.
Right. Yep.
But
It's a great retirement plan too. Another stream of income in retirement.
mhm,
I have rental
yeah,
property, and that's my plan, is to keep it for cash flow in retirement.
well, and that's ultimately how we win, right? Long term. And so if you think about it, like where everybody, Dave Ramsey, whoever you want to listen to, right? Like, am I frozen on your screen, by the way?
You are, but I can still hear
How
you.
about
There
now?
you moved to. Now you're
Okay,
good.
cool. I was like, man,
Like a
I'm talking, but my
ventriloquist.
mouth's not moving. I mean, there's lots of great people will tell you, and I'm not a financial planner advisor, but like been around the community long enough to know, uh, like diversify, right? Like,
Yeah.
sure, I can play the stock market, and generally speaking, the S&P will deliver, a 9 to 11% annual return year over year, assuming that you park your money there and you're not playing games, right?
Right.
Same thing for a 401, right? Same thing for an IRA or now universal and whole life. There's all these different products. The one thing I will say though, like particularly about real estate, is it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
Like if Enron collapses or whatever, like where does your money go? Like you have nothing. Like yeah,
Yeah. And if the
it's
stock market goes down, someone's getting that money. Where'd it go? Right.
somebody, yeah, it's just gone, right?
Yeah.
So like when it comes to like long term, oh, I need a retirement strategy, and well, ultimately for people wanting to retire, like you gotta have enough continuing like income to live off of, whatever that looks like for you. And mailbox money is a really great way to do it. And
Yeah.
property is it's not a bad thing. There's more millionaires been made between the stock market and real estate than any other vehicle out there. And so, like when it comes to the VA home loan benefit, veterans have this blank checkbook. You do not have to put a down payment, which you can, and there's some circumstances where you may, but really all we're talking about is closing costs. And if you're working with a reputable realtor like yourself, then we're going to be able to negotiate and put a strategy together between the real estate agent, the loan officer, the seller. We're going to be able to put this together to make it as most cost effective as possible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a no brainer. Like I had a client in here with me, and I'm in housing still, and I'm still a licensed loan officer, but I work more on the housing side now. And I had an Army couple come in, and they're wanting to build about a $1.1 million home, and they were like, "Well, we don't want to use our VA home loan benefit um, because the fees are too high." And I said, "Okay, well, can you elaborate on that?" And this is a common misnomer, right? In some cases it's true, in some cases it's not. But sometimes they'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, like the VA loan, cool, you don't have to put money down, but isn't that risky because you don't have any equity off the jump?" Which, yeah, if you're trying to sell the house immediately, like we're talking,
Yeah.
this is true. Um, but then also they're talking about, well, potential fees that are associated with it, because the VA home loan benefit, it's not a taxpayer thing. It's funded by veterans. So the Department of Veteran Housing, or Department of Veteran Affairs, the housing benefit itself is funded through the VA, what's called the VA funding fee, right? Which is a
Mhm.
flat fee that is, in many cases, rolled into the loan, financed. You can pay it at closing, you can pay it out of pocket, but in many cases, people are paying it over the life of the loan, to kind of spread out the cost of that. And
And that is
currently,
that that funding fee is a percentage of the cost of the house, like the title policy is? Is that
uh,
how that's
yep,
calculated
very
or
similar to
different?
that. It'll be a percentage of the actual, you know, house price, right? Like there are other things that might get added into the overall cost of the transaction. But say you buy a house for $200,000, it would be a percentage of that. Currently, that's 3.3%. Which, if you're buying $1 million house, 3.3% of $1 million is
Yeah.
a lot of money. And so, well, then I was like, okay, well, what are you planning to utilize? Well, we're going to go conventional. I said, okay, so then are you going to put 20% down? And they said, no, we're just going to put 5% down. I said, okay, so you realize that you're going to have to pay something called private mortgage insurance, correct? And they're like, uh, yeah. No, we're aware of that. I'm like, all right. Did you do the math on private mortgage insurance? Because you're going to pay that for the next 15 uh, years, or whatever it is, until you
Yeah.
can get to
They
a
get to
good,
20% equity. Yeah.
so you can get to 20% equity. And newsflash, the bank is going to get their money up front. And so if you've ever looked at an
Mhm.
amortization chart for a 30-year mortgage, 360 monthly payments, the largest amount of interest is collected in the first 7 years,
Yeah.
up until about the 15-year point, to where it flips. And now the majority of your principal, which is meaning like portion of your payment that's going to pay down the balance of the house, becomes larger than the amount of money going to the bank.
Yeah.
And so you're not even getting to that point uh, until the 20% mark. So you're paying PMI on $1 million house. It's going to far exceed $30,000 or whatever it might be for the funding fee, which gets rolled into the loan. But another thing that we're going to eventually, or you're going to have folks talk about, to your point, is VA disability. So if a veteran has a Purple Heart and is active duty, they don't pay the funding fee. If a veteran is now post service and has a service connected disability rating, 10% or more, they don't pay a funding fee. Surviving spouses of veterans that passed away due to a service connection don't pay a funding fee. And that's forever. Even if you use the
Yeah.
VA loan 100 times,
No funding fee
um,
ever. Wow.
there's no funding fee. And so,
That's a
like,
nice benefit. Yeah.
it is. So you remove the funding fee in a lot of cases. This wouldn't be the case if you're active duty, just every day kind of dude moving around. Yep, there's a funding fee. Does it cost more? Yes, but you're not having to take cash out of your account and put it into a house, unless you want to, and you can use that cash to do other things like buy stock
Well, and
or
aren't
Bitcoin.
the interest rate is a little bit lower on the VA loans.
It is.
That
Mm-hmm.
helps with that a little bit over time.
It sure
And,
does. Mm-hmm.
you
So
know,
on
the
average, I would say the VA loan is typically about a 0.5% better
half percent.
on a rate, usually. But again, every company is a little bit different, right? So when you're shopping around and you're looking for these subject matter experts, um, yeah, we need to talk cost and rate and all that kind of stuff too. So, all right, once we whittle it down to a couple people that know what they're talking about, they got their poop in a group, right, so to speak.
Right.
Um, then, okay, now we can talk cost, right? Let's compare apples to oranges or apples to apples or whatever you want to call it, right? So it is a consideration for sure, but there's things you can do to work on that, right? Again, in the transaction with your team of professionals, um, we might be able to get money to buy the rate down.
Yeah.
Um, we might be working with the builder that is offering incentives. We might assume a VA loan from an existing buyer that has a 3% interest rate. There's so many different ways to do it.
That would be sweet.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways, but you gotta, you know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So you gotta put the plan together, like
Yeah.
with the team, and say, hey, this is it. And the Marine that we were talking about earlier, like that's what we did. We had a real estate agent, we had a lender, we had the individual, right? Like we talk it all out. Like, what does this look like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? You know, what are the risks? What happens if this doesn't work? What's plan B? Like, how fast can I dump the house? What's that going to cost me? Et cetera, et cetera.
So something
And so,
else that might be holding people back is fear that their credit score is not good enough to get into a loan. Let's talk a little bit about that credit rating and who's actually putting the restriction on,
yeah, that's a great one.
the minimum
Yeah,
credit
I
score.
mean, so um, obviously the fear of the unknown, right? And man, I can tell some stories because I've been in the valley and I've been at the top of the mountain, financially speaking. Right now, I think I'm on the cliff somewhere, is what it feels like.
Holding on with your
But
fingernails.
yeah, hanging on. You know, things have been a little bit tight the past couple of years. But
Mhm.
um, you know, again, if you're only talking to one source or you're not doing the research, then unfortunately you might not get the truth. And so let's use a very large bank that resides in South Texas that has, say, a 620 requirement um, to get a VA loan, right? Amongst other things. But that's just, okay, basic, you know, let's just start with the credit rating. Um, a lot of times what will happen is people call, they get their credit pulled. They're like, yeah, I think it's good enough. Credit Karma said I'm like 630. So I should be good to go. Call, they run credit, like, hey man, like, you know, you got a lot of debt, you need to get your DTI down. Unfortunately, your credit's still low. So, you know, right now you don't qualify. So like just go fix yourself. And then once you get yourself situated, like come back and let's talk about it again. And that happens a lot, a lot, a lot. And that's defeating because we were talking about veterans, you know, being very trusting, putting themselves out there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know that tends to kind of like stick. Like, well, I don't qualify.
Well, and people
So
also will talk about that then. Well, you can't get it unless you're, like that word of mouth thing also is also negativity spreads that way even better than positivity does.
yeah,
By word of
absolutely.
mouth. Yeah.
Like, and here's a clue that you might not be getting the best information is if you're looking over to the right to the same dude that's telling you how to fix your credit, who's also renting or probably
Right.
has equally crappy credit. Like, hey man, we can drink beers together, but you're probably not the resource. So there's a lot of like, well, my buddy said,
Yeah.
yeah, but like, did he really know? Because the truth of the matter is like the VA loan, the VA home loan benefit, the benefit, right? I guess that's a better way to say it. The benefit, there is no credit score requirement.
Right. It just
And so
depends
I,
on what the lender's
with the lenders, right?
criteria are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, credit score is an indicator of risk. That's
Mm-hmm.
all that is. This tells us how likely are you to pay back the money that we're lending you, essentially. Are you less of a credit risk? Are you more of a credit risk? And so it's more expensive to borrow money when you're more of a credit risk. It's less expensive, hence why everybody wants to have a really high credit score to borrow money. Some people will say that debt is bad, but you can have good debt. I'll borrow money all day long at 5%, 4%, 3%, whatever it might be, all day long. That's cheap money. Now, look at some of the interest rates we see now. Maybe, oh, I got credit cards with 22% interest rate. Okay,
Yeah.
uh,
Ridiculous.
probably want to talk about these things, right? But the point of the matter is just because somebody says you don't qualify, it's like, okay, well, you said that, but really what they should be saying is you don't qualify with us. You know, go talk to Sherry. Maybe there's some other organizations or entities that not only going to help you fix those problems if they're problems, that are causing a roadblock, but also that you might qualify with right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
So
it's not necessarily no, it's just no with this person, and we may be able to find a way to work it out and do it faster than what they said, finding someone who will take a 600 or a 580 rather than having to be 620. And there's another something that kind of goes with that as far as risk. You're going to get pre-approved or pre-qualified for a certain amount, but it's not always the best idea to just like spend all that money of your pre-approval, right? If you get pre-approved up to $500,000, you don't have to buy a $500,000 house. You can buy a $350,000 house, maybe, that suits your needs great. And then you don't end up being house poor and having that extra risk of getting foreclosed on, or, sitting on the floor instead of a couch and playing cards instead of watching TV, that kind of thing,
That's true. Yeah, no. Again, a good professional that's working in your best interest is going to be honest with you on some of those things, and they should be. I have had multiple clients in the past that qualify for an extremely large amount of money. But to your point, like, I'm not a financial planner or financial advisor, but I have a fiduciary responsibility and a responsibility just as a good human being, especially if I have information that they should know about or at least be aware of, to be like, hey man, like, let's look at, like, I've had people do budgets, I've had people do a lot of different things, but like, let's look at this. Let's really break this down. Like, how are you going to do this? Because if poop hits the fan, then what? Right. And like, so like, again, planning, right? We're not just going to the store and buying something off the shelf, man. Like, we have to plan for this. This will be most likely the largest financial transaction that anybody ever makes. And so we have to plan accordingly for that.
Big deal.
I'll tell you a story real quick, and then we can move to kind of just recap a little bit of what we talked about. But and again, forgive me if you've heard this, because I tell this story when I'm teaching and stuff often.
Maybe I have, but everybody out there hasn't heard it yet, so have at it.
True. So beyond, okay, let's say we get to the point to where we move past the fear and we're just going to sit down with some folks to start putting rubber on the road. Like I said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And likely, if you sit down in front of a loan officer and you're giving yourself vulnerability to have them look in every aspect of your financial life, you're really hoping that they're going to give you the best advice possible in every facet. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. I see, when I do a pre-approval for a client, more information about them financially than probably anybody has ever seen in their life. Their family, sometimes even their spouses, certainly their friends and close friends, right? I see how much money they have in their accounts, how many accounts they have, where they spend their money, if they have any savings, if they have any investments, how much, what's their credit report look like, all of them, any kind of public records, any kind of bankruptcies, any kind of liens, child support, alimony, tax arrears. I see your debt to income ratio. I see, your credit score, right? Like, I know what kind of job you have, how many jobs you've had, how much money you make, right? Like, I can see all these things, and it's a shame when the only thing the individual does is just try to find a pre-approval, and they don't offer up maybe solutions to help better them. Not only just because, let's say, they got approved, right? But there's still opportunities to better their situation further.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame. And it clicked for me years ago, like, having all that information. And I was promoting a VA education class online. And I had an individual reach out to me on the phone. His name was Juan. I won't say his last name because I haven't talked to him to see if I could really share this, but I'm sure he would be fine. His name was Juan, and he told me, "Hey man, I just got out of the VA, struggling with some substance abuse issues. I saw some of your content, and I really want to figure out how to use my VA home loan benefit. And he's like, I'm kind of at the rope's end, man. Like, I'm done. And I'm like, well, where are you staying at right now? And he's like, I'm homeless. I don't have a place to stay. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I mean, I'm homeless. And I'm like, well, do you have a job? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, do you have any income? He's like, well, I'm a 30% disabled veteran. So I do have some income coming in, but I don't have a car. I don't have a house. I just move around and stay where I can. The little bit of money I do get helps me get through it. And he's like, I know this benefit exists, but I don't know what the requirements are, like what I need. And so I was like, okay. I was like, let's connect. Let's sit down and let's look at all these things, right? And so we did. At the time, he had credit in the 400s, no money. He had income, very small amount, a few $100s, right? Essentially, I think it was about $500 coming in every month.
Wow.
No place to stay, no car, and I got to a point to where I was like really starting to really connect with a lot of veteran advocates and um, understand, some of these resources and stuff that are out there. And it was apparent to me that I could impact this gentleman's life if he gave me the opportunity and he participated, which is also important.
Yeah.
And so we sat down and talked about it. And I was like, I could put a plan together for you. I said, well, I'm going to drag in a real estate agent who, Judy, was, I believe, the real estate agent on that one, if I'm not mistaken. And we've done this for a few people, which is pretty cool. But I was like, okay, like, number one, we've got multiple things to tackle here. First and foremost, you need to be somewhere. So we got in touch with the HUD, and we got him a HUD VASH voucher, it's called, basically a Section 8 housing voucher.
Yes.
Which gave him 6 months of benefit to stay, very minimal cost in Section 8 housing here in San Antonio. So that got him off the streets, right? And he had enough money to run buses and stuff like that. And so it's like, okay, well, we got you a place, but now we need to start working on your disability rating because he could hardly walk. He had disabilities from his service, walked with a cane, and a whole host of other things, right? So the 30% didn't quite
Cover it. Yeah.
connect.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, have you tried to increase it? He's like, well, and this is so typical, and this is a whole other segment. Like, I could talk about this probably just as much as the housing benefit and get in the weeds on it. But I'm like, okay. I said, we're not going back to the VA. We're going to go to a different third party, and we're going to work with them, and they're going to advocate on your behalf. That way you don't have to worry about it. All you got to do is participate, tell them what's up. We'll get everything sorted. So we get him involved in that. Then I get him involved with the credit repair specialist. Called the guy, hey man, need a favor. We're not charging this dude. Just by the way, I'll buy you dinner. It's going to be a success story. We're going to do it. I need this dude's credit to be up like 620. Like, I need his credit up in that area. Okay, start working on that. Then I talk with the real estate agent and we go talk to a local builder. And I said, hey man, good friend of mine, sales rep. Again, I'll protect the names just for the sake of it. But I'm like, hear me out. Hear me out. I got a guy. I want to put him in one of your homes. We're going to build it from the ground up because I need a year. I need a year. I need a year to get all this sorted, but we're going to build it from the ground up. I can get you a qualification pending credit, which is complete. Basically, it's just not even worth anything it's written on. But I'm like, I understand everybody needs to be lockstep in this process. And, Like, we're going to lean into this, and we're going to provide this solution to this gentleman, um, to give him something to be excited about
Yeah.
and to move. And so we all like kind of got together, brain trust, like vertically head nodding. And long story short, a year later, just over a year later, I think it was about 14 months, super hard loan file. People were not happy with me. It was difficult, but we knew the benefits, we knew the guidelines, we knew what we could do, we knew how to do it, and we had a bunch of people working together. And just over a year later, we put him in a brand new home, um, no money out of pocket because he was using his benefit, but we negotiated some pretty good incentives with the builder. Bought his rate down, no closing costs that he had to pay. Builder picked up all that tab. His credit got up into the 600s. He got 100% VA disability rating, which means he doesn't pay property taxes here in Texas. So his monthly payment on his mortgage was sexy.
Yeah.
He got back pay because he should have been rated higher earlier. He bought a brand new car cash, and he still lives in that home today and has completely changed his whole life, up leveled his whole life. And I talk to him from time to time, and it's like, that's why we do this. Yeah, everybody wants to make money and mailbox money.
That's such a life-changing hand up in all, more things than just one. And imagine if everybody got involved in, like that. There's so many people who need exactly that to help them get their disability, to help them get into a residence so they can get a job. They have to have an address and, get them transportation, check into, and definitely going to have episodes about getting that disability rating and how to go about that. And that's going to take a lot of time to figure that out, but getting in there, maybe having your credit repair guy on here, that would be amazing to have to talk about.
Well, you're doing that, right? And that's what's important, right? So we're both wearing our red shirts today, our VA rep, Veteran Association of Real Estate Professionals, right? So bravo.
We didn't remember everyone deployed. Yes.
So that was, well, we didn't plan this. We just
right. There was no memo.
Exactly. And you're doing that, right? Like, so that's the point, is one veteran at a time. Like, it is harder. It is more time consuming. You could do way easier transactions and spend less time doing it, for sure. But that's why the folks need advocates that are going to do it, because, like, I'll tell you what, on the flip side of it, and from a business standpoint, that dude has referred me more people, and so do many others, then, like, it's like, you help do the right thing and help people, and it will come back, right? And so,
wasn't it Zig Ziglar said that if you help enough people get what they want, that eventually you'll get what you want. And I think just helping people is a huge reward on its own. I mean, man, that's stuff that you can't put a price on. Yeah,
you can't. And so, like, it's not for everybody. I get it. Which is why, if we say multiple times throughout this conversation, like, really know who you're working with and what capabilities they have. I would say, by and large, like, I get calls weekly or messages, and they're not all about business. It's about resources. And I would say that that's probably what I'm most known for, is being a connector, like you pointed out, and having the resources. And so that was cultivated over time. It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And so I salute you on your mission.
No, thank you. I hope I can do someone proud and help somebody. That's the thing.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. And like I said, hold the line. There are going to be some rough days, but just keep doing what you can do, right? And so
I'm nothing if not persistent. That's I think that's irritated my parents off and on throughout my life, but I'm nothing if not persistent. So I'll keep at it.
I tip my hat.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today. So we kind of
Sherry.
do a quick recap.
Yeah, a little recap. So, like I said, folks, there's so much we could talk about in this. And really, this conversation was more just that, a conversation. Yeah, there's a lot we could educate on. Yes, there's a lot of resources. So I would say be aware that number one, 22 million veterans, only 16% are utilizing this benefit. There's a lot of people out there that can and want to help, but you need to do the research and find the advocates in your community
Yes.
that are going to steer you in the right direction. And if they don't know how to do that, they can reach out to you
Yep.
or they can reach out to me
Yeah.
and we will happily help them.
And we
Uh,
can refer, I can refer people in lots of different cities and countries, through my
yep,
networks of realtors. And I would guess that lenders have the same thing, that they would be able to refer them to lenders who are um, sympathetic to this and in this realm, where they have
mhm,
this knowledge of how to give someone the best benefit that they can get out of what's afforded to them.
absolutely. And, we talked briefly too on just, hey, like removing the blinders a little bit. I understand the thought process behind why somebody might be apprehensive in purchasing a home, especially if you're still active duty. But you need to do the research now on these benefits and connect with people because you're missing out on opportunities to
Right.
build potential wealth and a legacy for your family. You're missing out on it. I'm not saying, and we didn't say that every option is always a green light, but again, you've got to have the education and the perspective to know that. And
Yeah.
so, that's a super important thing. Like it can be life changing. It can be life changing, and it has been for millions of people that invest in real estate, right? And then, we also talked briefly about like, hey, like, don't freak out. Like, if you're worried about your credit, you're worried about, well, what if I need to rent it? Or like, well, what happens to plan A, the plan B, the plan C, like all that stuff. We talked about that. Like, there's so much to talk about in that. And there's so many different avenues that you could leverage this benefit, whether it's one home, multiple homes, new build, condos, apartments, multifamily, loads of options. Just know that not everybody can do everything. Not every lender is the same. Just because they have an American flag on their shirt or whatever doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Right.
Um, and pay attention, listen, write it down, understand you have every resource at your fingertips with a good team behind you to change your life. 100%.
And change your life for the better. I mean, it's
Change your life for the better. 100%. It just starts with the conversation with the right people and putting a plan together, right? And in closing, I would just say, um, we're taught very much so in the military, right? Like, hey, fail to plan, plan to fail. We're also told that, hey, the plan is going to change as soon as you start executing on that, right?
oh, exactly. People plan and God laughs, right?
Right. But not planning anything ever and then just being like jumping into it with no plan like is a little bit of a recipe for disaster. And I would just encourage people to talk to you. Like I said, if they want to have a conversation, I'm not in the sales trying to sell anything or whatever, just what I like to do. It's a passion of mine.
Yeah.
Connect, and it doesn't matter. Quite literally this morning I was texting with somebody in Germany that's PCSing back that has questions. I'm like, I'm not going to do your loan. I'm inactive, but I can connect you. What resources do you need?
Yeah.
Let's
What do
talk.
you need? Yeah.
Let's talk about
Okay. So if somebody did have questions for you or think that maybe you could connect them with someone, how would they get a hold of you, Joel?
it. You can call me on my personal cell phone at 501 626 7301. That's my direct line. I've had that number for eons. And so I'm pretty responsive, or as much as I can be, particularly on text. I'm hard to pin down on the phone. You know this already. Um, Many of my friends would say the same, but text is good. And if not, Facebook, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Insta, TikTok, right? All that stuff. I'm more on Facebook than anything, but you can direct message me on Facebook.
Are
Just
you
on my
the only
personal
Joel Sparta in
Joel
Facebook?
Sparta.
You're easy to
Yep.
find, huh?
Easy to find. And
Okay.
then if they want to email me, it's joelsparta@gmail.com. Easy day.
Easy peasy. Okay. Well, if you want to get a hold of me for any questions, my number is 979-492-0101. My email is Sherry, it's SherriEchols @rocketmail.com. I have a vanity one, but I live in Rocket Mail, so that's what I use. And I'm on Facebook, Sherri Echols, Realtor, Sell with Sherri. Texting is probably the fastest and quickest way to get a hold of me and get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go
And
from
between us, we have the resources, like you said earlier, whether it's
yeah.
a veteran in crisis, struggling with PTSD, employment services, housing services, financial literacy, credit, real estate, finance, investing, disability, literally highly connected in all fronts with some great people that we know, like, and trust, and happy to help always.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on to our what do you call it, flagship, our very first episode. Super excited to have you here, and I look forward to talking with you many more times.
That's no problem. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, Joel. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Sherri.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. We're excited about helping ease your transition. If you're needing help or answers, please reach out. I would love to find an expert who can answer the questions in a future episode, or I can connect you with someone for more immediate help. We're here to serve you for a change. Don't be shy. My contact information is right here for you to use.